They kept missing each other by 5 minutes, until the day neither was late. At exactly 8:05 a.m., Hannah Brooks sprinted toward Platform 3, with one hand gripping her canvas tote and the other desperately waving at a train that had already made up its mind. Wait! The doors slid shut. She reached them just as the warning chime ended. The train remained still for the smallest fraction of a second. Then it pulled away. Inside the last carriage, a man standing near the window happened to turn around. Their eyes met, only for a heartbeat. A young woman with wind-blown hair, slightly out of breath, standing on the platform with a look that was equal parts hope and disappointment. A man in a navy coat, one hand wrapped around the overhead rail, watching her disappear as the train carried him away. 5 minutes. That was all. 5 minutes too late. Neither of them knew. It would be the first of many times fate would let them see each other, but never quite meet. Hannah let out a long sigh as the train vanished into the tunnel. Well, she muttered to herself, at least I got my cardio. She checked the station clock. 8:05, exactly 5 minutes late. Again, not because she had overslept, not because she had forgotten the time, because 10 minutes earlier, an elderly woman had dropped 2 grocery bags while crossing the street. Oranges had rolled everywhere. A loaf of bread had landed in a puddle. Everyone else hurried past. Hannah had stopped. She chased oranges down the sidewalk, carried the bags to the woman's apartment entrance, and listened politely to a 5-minute story about the woman's grandchildren in Arizona. By the time Hannah looked at her watch, she was already doomed. She smiled anyway. My students would say helping people is worth missing one train. Then she laughed softly. They'd probably also say I should buy a faster watch. Hannah Brooks was 25 years old and taught second grade at Maple Grove Elementary. She believed glitter could solve most classroom problems. She carried emergency crayons in every handbag she owned. She talked to plants, apologized to pigeons when she accidentally startled them, and somehow managed to spill coffee at least 3 mornings every week. She also had an unfortunate talent for arriving exactly a little too late, not because she was irresponsible, because she couldn't seem to ignore people who needed help. Meanwhile, 4 train cars ahead, Daniel Hayes glanced one last time through the rear window before turning back toward the city. He wasn't sure why. He never looked back. Daniel was 33, a partner at one of the city's fastest-growing architectural firms. His calendar was planned in 15-minute blocks. His shirts were arranged by color. His meetings began exactly on time. He had taken the 8 o'clock train every weekday for nearly 6 years. The same carriage, the same seat whenever it was available. Routine made sense. People rarely did. Yet, for reasons he couldn't explain, he kept thinking about the woman running toward the closing doors. She had looked disappointed, but not angry, almost amused, as though missing trains was simply another ordinary inconvenience life enjoyed throwing at her. Daniel frowned at the thought, then opened the presentation on his tablet. By the next station, he had almost forgotten her. Almost. Back on Platform 3, Hannah boarded the next train 10 minutes later. This one was far more crowded. She squeezed inside with a paper cup of coffee, balanced carefully in one hand. I've got this, she whispered confidently. She did not, in fact, have this. The train lurched. Instead of spilling coffee on another passenger like every commuter secretly feared, Hannah somehow managed to pour nearly the entire cup onto her own white sneakers. She stared down in disbelief. A little girl sitting nearby giggled. Hannah looked at her soaked shoes. Well, she sighed dramatically, at least I was polite enough to inconvenience only myself. Even the girl's mother laughed. By the time Hannah reached school, her shoes had mostly dried. Her students barely noticed. One little boy did raise his hand. Miss Brooks? Yes, Oliver. Did your shoes drink coffee this morning? They made some questionable life choices. The classroom erupted with laughter. Across the city, Daniel finished his morning meeting earlier than expected. He left the office just before lunch and walked back through Central Station on his way to another client presentation. He rarely noticed anything around him. Today, something caught his eye. A pale blue scarf lay folded awkwardly near the edge of Platform 3, half on the bench, half on the ground. People stepped around it without stopping. Daniel looked up and down the platform. No one seemed to be searching for it. He bent down and picked it up. It was soft, still faintly warm, and carried the light scent of lavender. He glanced toward the departure board. Someone had probably left in a hurry. Someone who had been 5 minutes too late. He almost handed it to station security. Instead, he folded it carefully, slipped it into his briefcase. "I'll turn it in tomorrow," he told himself. It was the logical thing to do, yet somehow, as Daniel walked away with a stranger's forgotten scarf tucked safely inside his bag, he couldn't shake the image of the woman who had been running toward a train she had just missed. For reasons he couldn't explain, he hoped the scarf belonged to her. Even though he had no way of knowing if it did, and somewhere across the city, Hannah paused halfway through teaching a spelling lesson. She looked around the classroom, then frowned. My scarf. It wasn't around her neck anymore. She smiled helplessly. Well, I guess today's just full of 5-minute mistakes. The first time felt like coincidence. The second time felt strange. By the fourth, even fate seemed to be laughing. Neither Hannah nor Daniel knew the other existed beyond a single fleeting glance on a train platform, yet somehow they kept circling the same city. Always arriving just a little too early, or a little too late, never together. On Wednesday afternoon, Hannah wandered into a tiny independent bookstore after school. She loved old bookstores because they smelled like stories instead of perfume. She spent 20 minutes debating between two novels before finally buying the one with the badly designed cover because, as she told the cashier, the ugly ones usually have the best hearts. 5 minutes after she left, the front door opened again. Daniel walked in. He headed straight toward the exact same shelf, reached for the same novel, only to find an empty space. The owner smiled apologetically. "I'm afraid someone bought the last copy." Daniel looked at the shelf for another second. "What about that one?" he asked, pointing to the other novel Hannah had almost chosen. The owner laughed. "Funny enough, that's the one she almost bought." Daniel raised an eyebrow. She, the young teacher, couldn't stop talking to herself. Daniel smiled politely. For reasons he couldn't explain, he wondered what the book looked like in someone else's hands. Friday morning brought another almost. Hannah stopped at her favorite neighborhood cafe before work. The owner already knew her order. Vanilla latte, blueberry muffin, extra napkins. "You planning another coffee accident?" he teased. "I like to stay consistent." She laughed, grabbed her breakfast, and sat beside the window, grading spelling quizzes while soft jazz drifted through the speakers. Exactly 5 minutes later, she packed her bag and hurried toward school. 3 minutes after that, Daniel entered the cafe. Without looking around, he sat at the empty table by the window. The barista placed his usual black coffee in front of him. Daniel glanced down. The coffee ring on the table was still wet. A tiny doodle of a smiling sun had been drawn on the paper napkin someone had forgotten. He picked it up. The handwriting beneath it read, "Good luck today," probably written for someone else. Yet somehow, it made him smile. Saturday afternoon, a small bakery downtown. Hannah stood in line staring at a lemon tart displayed in the front case. "There is only one left," the baker warned. Hannah looked behind her. No one else seemed interested. "I'll save it from loneliness." She paid. Waved cheerfully. Left. 5 minutes later, Daniel pushed open the same bakery door. "I'll have the lemon tart." The baker sighed dramatically. "I'm sorry. You missed it by exactly 5 minutes." Daniel almost laughed. Again? The baker blinked. Again? Nothing. He ordered a cinnamon roll instead. It wasn't nearly as good. The city seemed determined to keep them walking through each other's footprints. Sunday morning, the botanical gardens. Hannah stopped to admire cherry blossoms. Daniel paused beneath the very same tree after she walked away. Monday evening, the Riverside Park. Hannah listened to a violinist playing Debussy. Daniel dropped a few dollars into the musician's case 6 minutes later. Tuesday, the Art Museum. She lingered in front of an impressionist painting for nearly 10 minutes because she couldn't decide whether it made her feel peaceful or lonely. Daniel stood in the exact same place shortly afterward and reached exactly the same conclusion, without ever knowing someone else had been thinking the same thing only moments before. If someone had watched them from above, the pattern would have seemed impossible. They preferred quiet cafes over noisy restaurants. They both slowed down whenever they heard someone playing piano. They chose paper books instead of e-readers. Both loved rainy mornings. Both always took the Green Line home. They even listened to the same old jazz playlist while commuting. The city was enormous. Yet somehow, their lives kept folding toward one another like two pages trying desperately to meet. One afternoon, Daniel opened his briefcase while preparing for a client presentation. The pale blue scarf slipped into his hands. He had meant to leave it at lost and found. Then another meeting had happened. Then another deadline. Now nearly 2 weeks had passed. He unfolded it carefully. The fabric was impossibly soft, and somehow, it still carried the faint scent of lavender. Not strong, just enough to suggest someone had worn it recently. Someone who laughed easily. Someone who probably forgot things because she was thinking about other people instead. Daniel caught himself smiling, then stopped. He had designed skyscrapers worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Why was he wondering about the owner of a forgotten scarf? He folded it again, more carefully this time. His assistant knocked. "Your client's here." Daniel slipped the scarf back into his briefcase, but instead of putting it beneath the paperwork as he always had, he placed it on top, close enough to see whenever he opened the bag. For the first time, he realized he wasn't keeping it because someone might claim it. He was keeping it because he wanted to know who had left it behind. And somewhere across town, Hannah glanced at another train pulling away without her. She laughed quietly to herself. 5 minutes again. She had no idea. Someone else had started measuring time the exact same way. Daniel began noticing something strange. It started with little moments. A bookstore employee saying, "The young teacher was just here." A barista wiping down a table that was still warm from someone else's coffee. A museum guide mentioning that another visitor had spent almost 20 minutes admiring the exact same painting. It always happened the same way. Someone had been there, just before him, about 5 minutes before. At first Daniel dismissed it as coincidence. Cities were full of strangers crossing invisible paths. But after a while, he caught himself wondering, who was this person? Why did they seem to enjoy all the places he loved? And why did it always feel as though he was following footprints instead of making his own? Across town, Hannah had reached exactly the same conclusion, except she gave the mystery a name. She sat with another teacher during lunch, stirring tomato soup absent-mindedly. "You know what's weird?" "What?" "I think there's a ghost." Her friend blinked. "A ghost?" "Not the scary kind, the punctual kind." Her friend laughed. "What are you talking about?" Hannah leaned closer, as if revealing a government secret. "I keep missing the same man." "What man?" "I don't know. I've never actually met him, but every place I go, someone says a man had just left, always a few minutes earlier." Her friend raised an eyebrow. "So maybe he just has good taste." Hannah smiled. "Maybe. I call him," she pointed dramatically with her spoon, "the 5-minute man." Her friend laughed so loudly that 2 teachers turned around. "You're naming strangers now?" "I haven't named him. I've only given him a temporary title." Saturday morning brought another near miss. A golden retriever wandered nervously through Riverside Park, with a leash dragging behind it. Children tried chasing it. The dog ran faster. An elderly couple attempted to help. The dog politely ignored them. Then Hannah spotted it. "Oh, sweetheart." She crouched. Instead of chasing, she simply held out one hand. The dog hesitated, then slowly walked toward her. "There you are." She scratched behind its ears, just as a frantic teenage boy came running across the grass. "I'm so sorry." He slipped away. Hannah handed over the leash. "No harm done." The boy thanked her at least 5 times before leaving with the happily wagging dog. Exactly 6 minutes later, Daniel entered the same park. The same teenage boy hurried past him. Still slightly out of breath, Daniel noticed the leash. "Everything okay?" The teenager smiled. "Yeah, a really nice teacher helped catch him." Daniel looked toward the empty bench nearby. Whoever she was, he had missed her again. Days later, Daniel finally remembered the blue scarf folded carefully inside his briefcase. He stopped at Central Station before work and walked toward the lost and found office. The elderly clerk smiled. "Can I help you?" "I found this a few weeks ago." Daniel laid the scarf gently on the counter. "I'm embarrassed it took me this long." The clerk unfolded it. Still in beautiful condition. Daniel nodded. "I kept meaning to bring it. Life had simply gotten in the way." The clerk filled out a receipt. "Your name?" "Daniel Hayes." "And your phone number?" Daniel gave it automatically. "If the owner comes looking for it, we'll let them know." Daniel hesitated. He almost asked something ridiculous, like whether a young woman had ever come looking for a blue scarf. Instead, he smiled politely. "Thank you." Then he left. 5 minutes later, Hannah rushed into the station. Her school had held an unexpected parent meeting. She glanced nervously at the clock. Again, 5 minutes behind. The lost and found clerk looked up as she entered. "Oh, you must be here about the scarf." Hannah's eyes widened. "You found it?" "We didn't." A gentleman returned it. He reached beneath the counter and handed her the neatly folded blue scarf. Hannah wrapped it around her neck immediately. "I thought I'd lost this forever. It seems someone took very good care of it." She smiled softly. "I'm glad. Can I thank him?" The clerk looked at the paperwork. "I'm afraid he just left." Hannah laughed. "Let me guess." The clerk checked the station clock. "About 5 minutes ago." She shook her head. "Of course." Just as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A duplicate receipt lay beside the register. She wasn't trying to read it. The name simply stood out before the clerk could file it away. Returned by Daniel Hayes. For a moment, the noisy station disappeared. Daniel Hayes. Not the stranger. Not the 5-minute man. He had a real name. She whispered it once under her breath. Daniel Hayes. It sounded oddly familiar, as if she had been waiting to know it, long before she realized she wanted to. The clerk smiled. "Do you know him?" Hannah looked down at the scarf in her hands. She smiled to herself. "No." Her voice was quiet. "Not yet." Outside the station, the afternoon trains continued arriving and leaving with perfect precision. Somewhere across the city, Daniel walked into another meeting, completely unaware that the woman whose scarf he had quietly protected for weeks had finally learned his name. For the first time, fate had given one of them a clue. It just hadn't given them each other. The rain arrived without warning. One moment, Central Station was filled with the ordinary noise of commuters, rolling suitcases, and impatient footsteps. The next, the sky opened. Water crashed against the glass roof. Wind pushed rain beneath the platform awnings. Trains slowed, signals flickered, and then every light in the station went dark. For several seconds, no one moved. Then the emergency lights came on. A voice crackled through the speakers. "Due to a power failure, all Green Line service is temporarily suspended." A collective groan rose from the crowd. Hannah stood beneath the narrow shelter of Platform 3, holding her tote bag over her head, even though she was already wet. She checked the clock. 5:35 p.m. She had promised to return to school by 6 to help set up the spring reading fair. Of course this would happen today. She sighed. "Fine. 5-minute man, wherever you are, I hope you're enjoying this." Beside her, someone turned. 5-minute man? Hannah froze. The man standing next to her wore a dark coat spotted with rain. His hair was damp at the temples. A leather briefcase rested at his feet. She knew his face. Not clearly. Not from a real conversation, but from the train window. The morning she had missed the 8 o'clock. The man who had turned just as the doors closed. Her heart stumbled. Daniel studied her too. There was something familiar about the pale blue scarf around her neck. His gaze dropped to it, then returned to her face. "You found it," he said. Hannah touched the scarf. "You returned it." For one stunned second, the whole ridiculous pattern of the past several weeks seemed to click into place. The bookstores, the cafe, the bakery, the station, Daniel Hayes, the 5-minute man. Hannah laughed first, not softly, a full, disbelieving laugh. "You're him." Daniel's expression shifted. "I'm who?" "The man who keeps arriving 5 minutes before me." He raised an eyebrow. "I was under the impression you kept arriving 5 minutes before me. That is factually impossible." "Is it?" "Yes. I have witnesses." "So do I." The rain thundered around them. For the first time, neither was moving away. Daniel glanced toward the departure board. No trains, no schedule, no escape. Hannah smiled. "Well, this is awkward." "Why?" "I gave you a nickname." Daniel looked almost concerned. "What nickname?" She hesitated, then decided the truth could not possibly make the situation stranger. "The 5-minute man." He stared at her. "That sounds like an insult." "It was affectionate. Before you met me. I have a very active imagination." Daniel laughed. And just like that, the tension broke. They talked. At first, only about the strange trail of near misses, the last lemon tart, the bookstore, the museum, the dog in Riverside Park. Daniel admitted he had kept the scarf far longer than necessary. Hannah admitted she had asked the lost and found clerk if Daniel looked mysterious but responsible. The clerk had apparently said, mostly tired. Daniel considered that accurate. Then their conversation moved beyond coincidence. Hannah told him about teaching 2nd grade, about children who believed glue sticks could fix everything, and about one student who had once spelled elephant with 14 letters. Daniel told her about architecture, about the strange pressure of designing buildings people would one day fill with memories, and how clients often cared more about marble countertops than natural light. Hannah listened. Not politely, actually listened. Daniel noticed that. He also noticed the way she smiled before she laughed, as if joy always arrived 1 second early. 30 minutes passed without either of them checking the time. That alone felt impossible. Then Hannah reached into her bag. I should call the school. Daniel pulled out his phone at the exact same moment. Both screens were black. They pressed their power buttons. Nothing. They looked at each other. Dead? Hannah asked. Completely. She laughed. This feels statistically unlikely. Daniel glanced at the stalled trains. I'm beginning to think statistics have given up on us. Outside the station, traffic crawled through the storm. A line of taxis formed near the curb. Hannah spotted the time on the station clock. 6:07. Oh no. What? The reading fair. Daniel picked up his briefcase. I have a client waiting across town. They hurried toward the entrance together. The station was chaos. People pushed toward buses, taxis, and ride-shares. A cab pulled up. Daniel opened the door. Hannah stepped back. You take it. You need to get to the school. And you have a client. I'll find another. Before they could argue, a teacher from Hannah's school pulled up in a small car and leaned across the passenger seat. Hannah, she waved through the rain. Hannah looked back at Daniel. For a moment, neither moved. This was usually where one of them disappeared. But now they had met. They knew the other existed. Surely that was enough. Goodbye, 5-minute man, Hannah said. Daniel smiled. Try being on time next time. No promises. She ran toward the car. Daniel climbed into the taxi. The doors closed. The vehicles moved in opposite directions. For half a block, Daniel watched Hannah's car through the rain-streaked window. Then something struck him. He sat forward. Wait. The driver glanced in the mirror. What? Daniel reached for his dead phone. No number, no message, nothing. He had spent 30 minutes talking to the woman he had been missing for weeks, and he had forgotten to ask her name. Behind him, at the next intersection, Hannah suddenly turned in her seat. Her coworker looked over. What's wrong? Hannah stared through the rear window at the taxi disappearing into traffic. I never gave him my name. The light changed. Both cars moved on, and somehow, after finally finding each other, they had managed to lose each other all over again. After the storm, neither of them expected life to return to normal. It didn't. For Daniel, every train platform looked incomplete. Every coffee shop felt quieter than it should. Every time he saw a pale blue scarf in a crowd, his heart reacted before his mind could catch up. He had spent 30 minutes talking to the woman who had somehow wandered through his life for weeks, and he had forgotten the simplest question, what was your name? It was, without question, the most embarrassing professional failure of his adult life. He returned to Central Station the following afternoon. The elderly clerk at Lost and Found looked up and smiled. Back again? Daniel tried to sound casual. The woman who claimed the blue scarf. The clerk adjusted his glasses. The teacher? Daniel's expression changed immediately. So she is a teacher. The clerk nodded. A lovely young woman. Daniel waited. The clerk smiled kindly. I'm afraid I can't give out personal information. Daniel laughed quietly. I figured. He thanked the man anyway and walked away. 5 minutes later, Hannah stepped through the very same door. Hi, she said, slightly out of breath. The man who returned my scarf. The clerk sighed with amused sympathy. You two really have a talent for this. For what? Missing each other. Hannah frowned. He was just here. About 5 minutes ago. She closed her eyes. Of course he was. The clerk chuckled. I've worked here 32 years. I've never seen fate with such terrible time management. Over the following weeks, both of them searched in the only ways they knew how. Daniel started taking the 8:05 train instead of the 8 o'clock. Hannah began leaving school 5 minutes earlier. Without knowing it, they had accidentally switched places. Daniel would arrive at the cafe just after Hannah left. Hannah would visit the bookstore just after Daniel walked out. Sometimes they were separated by less than 1 city block. Once, Daniel held the door open for a woman leaving a flower shop. She thanked him without looking up. 30 seconds later, Hannah came out through the back entrance carrying the bouquet Daniel had unknowingly waited beside. The city seemed determined to keep teasing them. Then life, as it often does, became even more complicated. One Monday morning, Daniel was called into the executive conference room. His senior partner slid a folder across the table. Chicago. Daniel looked up. We're opening a new office. We want you to lead it. A year. The promotion is yours if you want it. It was everything he had worked toward. Bigger projects, a partnership expansion, a chance to build an entire skyline instead of a single building. Everyone expected him to say yes immediately. Instead, Daniel asked for time. That surprised everyone. It surprised him most of all. Across the city, Hannah received her own envelope. Boston, an elementary school known for its innovative literacy program, had offered her a one-year teaching fellowship. It came with better pay, professional development, and the opportunity to build the kind of classroom she had always dreamed about. Her principal hugged her. You have to go. Her fellow teachers celebrated. Her students promised to write letters every week. Hannah smiled. But that night, she sat alone on her apartment floor with the acceptance letter beside her. All she could think about was a man whose name she knew, but whose phone number she never asked for. 3 days later, the impossible happened. The lost and found clerk called Daniel's office. Mr. Hayes? Yes. I can't give you the young lady's information, but I can tell you this. She asked about you again. Daniel stood so quickly, his chair rolled backward. Did she leave a message? The old man hesitated. Not exactly, but I may have mentioned that you still seemed determined. Daniel smiled despite himself. Thank you. Later that afternoon, the clerk saw Hannah once again. He looked from one side of the counter to the other before leaning in conspiratorially. I probably shouldn't interfere. Hannah's eyes widened. But life has already done enough interfering. He tore a small piece of paper from a notepad. On it, he wrote only one sentence. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., Platform 3. No names, he said. No promises. Just, don't be late. Hannah folded the paper carefully. I won't. The next evening, she arrived at 5:50, 10 minutes early, for the first time in her life. She stood beneath the station clock, watching every person who stepped onto the platform. 6 p.m. The train arrived. Passengers came and went. Daniel wasn't there. She waited another minute. Then another. The station announcements echoed overhead. At exactly 6 p.m., Hannah looked down at the acceptance letter for Boston inside her bag. Maybe this was fate telling her to let go. With one last look toward the station entrance, she whispered softly, I guess we missed each other again. She turned and walked away. 5 minutes later, Daniel ran into the station. His taxi had been trapped behind an accident 2 streets away. He sprinted across the platform, breathing hard, scanning every face. No blue scarf, no warm smile, no Hannah, only the old station clock staring back at him. 6:05, the lost and found clerk appeared quietly beside him. You just missed her. Daniel didn't need to ask by how much. He already knew. 5 minutes. Again, he stood there long after the next train had departed, looking at the empty platform where she had been standing only moments before. Somewhere across the city, Hannah sat by the window of a bus heading home, watching the station disappear behind the rain-speckled glass. Neither of them knew it yet. Both had accepted jobs that would take them away for a year, and once again, 5 minutes had been enough to change everything. 1 year later, the city looked almost exactly the same. The trains still arrived on schedule. The coffee shop still served blueberry muffins that were slightly too sweet. The bookstore still smelled of old paper and rainy afternoons. But the two people who had spent an entire year missing each other by 5 minutes were no longer the same. Chicago had been good to Daniel. He had designed buildings he was proud of, led a successful office, earned every promotion people had predicted. When the board offered to extend his assignment for another year, everyone assumed he would accept. Instead, Daniel surprised them. No, he said simply. You've worked too hard to leave now, one partner argued. Daniel smiled. I've spent long enough building buildings. I'd like to go home and see if I can build a life. Across the country, Hannah had reached the same conclusion. Boston had given her everything she had hoped for. Wonderful students. Wonderful colleagues. A classroom that finally looked exactly the way she had imagined. When the principal offered her a permanent position, Hannah thanked her with genuine gratitude, then declined. Someone waiting back home? The principal asked. Hannah laughed softly. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. 2 weeks after returning, Daniel wandered through Central Station almost without thinking. He told himself he had only missed the place. The truth was harder to admit. He missed the possibility. The elderly clerk at Lost and Found was still there. His hair had grown whiter. His smile had not changed. "I was wondering when you'd come back," he said. Daniel laughed. "So was I." The old man disappeared into the back room. When he returned, he carried a small envelope. "I found this while cleaning my desk. It belongs to neither of you, but somehow, I think it belongs to both." Daniel opened it. Inside was the little piece of paper the clerk had once written before arranging their meeting. Below the original words, another sentence had been added in careful handwriting. He recognized neither pen, neither style, yet somehow, it felt as though both had written it. "If we're meant to meet, I'll be here, underneath. A date. Today. 6 o'clock. Platform 3. Daniel looked up. "What time is it?" The old clerk glanced at the station clock. 5:54. Daniel's heart skipped. He thanked the old man and ran. For the first time in years, Daniel Hayes ignored every rule he had ever made for himself. His phone vibrated. A client. He silenced it without looking. His assistant called. He declined. A taxi stopped beside him. He waved it away. He ran. Across the city, Hannah was cleaning the last box in her apartment when an old bookmark slipped from between 2 pages of a novel. On the back, in faded pencil, she had once written 4 words. Platform 3, 6 o'clock. She stared at it, then at the clock. 5:54. She smiled. No more. She grabbed her coat. On the sidewalk, an elderly man accidentally dropped his newspaper. For one instinctive second, Hannah slowed. Then the man looked up, smiled knowingly, and waved her forward. "I've got it." "Go." She blinked, then laughed. "Thank you." She kept running. No stopping. No detours. No helping strangers for just one more minute. No answering emails. No changing plans. No letting life steal 5 minutes again. The station clock changed. 5:59. Daniel reached platform 3 from one entrance. Almost at the same moment, Hannah appeared from the opposite staircase. Neither of them was early. Neither of them was late. The clock clicked forward. 6 p.m. exactly. Daniel saw her first. She was wearing the same pale blue scarf. Hannah saw him a heartbeat later. For a moment, neither moved. Then they both laughed. Daniel shook his head. 5 minutes? Hannah smiled through tears. Not today. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. Carefully, almost ceremonially, he unfolded the scarf he had kept for more than a year before returning it. "I thought," he said, smiling, "I had finally found its owner." Hannah stepped closer. She gently touched the edge of the fabric, then looked into his eyes. "No." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You found the person who comes with it." The distance between them disappeared. Daniel wrapped his arms around her. She held him just as tightly. A train rolled slowly into the station. Its doors opened with the familiar chime that had once separated them. Daniel glanced toward it, then offered his hand. This time, Hannah slipped her fingers into his. This time, together, they stepped aboard the very same train. For the first time, no doors closed between them. No platform was left behind. No 5-minute delay rewrote their story. As the train pulled away from platform 3, the camera drifted back through the station. The old lost and found clerk watched from his little office. He smiled to himself, then quietly crossed one item off a list that had waited on his desk for more than a year. Blue scarf. Finally returned. Outside the window, the city continued rushing toward tomorrow. Inside the train, 2 people who had spent a year missing each other by 5 minutes finally discovered something far more important than perfect timing. Sometimes, fate doesn't ask you to arrive earlier. It simply asks you not to stop trying until you arrive together. Sometimes, love doesn't leave because the feelings aren't real. Sometimes, it simply arrives 5 minutes too early, or 5 minutes too late. Hannah and Daniel spent an entire year believing they had missed each other because of bad timing. But in the end, they discovered something far more important. Fate may create the opportunity, but love is the choice to keep showing up. Perhaps that's the lesson this story leaves behind. Life isn't made up only of the big decisions we remember. It's also shaped by the 5 extra minutes we spend helping a stranger, waiting for someone, or finding the courage to try one more time instead of giving up. So here's a question for you. Have you ever wondered how different your life might be if just one moment had happened 5 minutes earlier, or 5 minutes later? And if you enjoy heartwarming stories about fate, second chances, and the beautiful ways love finds us when we least expect it, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. We'll see you in our next unforgettable journey. Share your story in the comments. We'd love to read it.